Aha! I should be live now. Let me just check and make sure on that while I make sure I'm not a complete idiot. Alright, time to get started with this. This stream is not going to be nearly as long as the last one. I'm not doing this for 4 hours today. But I am still going to go for a while, and I'm going to be a little bit more, like I'm going to actually, I think I'm going to be able to get more done this time, because this guy is, so I'm going to maybe get rid of this, maybe not, maybe keep some of it, most of it, all of it. I might stay in the same project. I might make a new one. I haven't really decided yet. I'm just gonna fool around and see, see what the inspiration happens to be. But there is some stuff I want to go over. So the question that Philip was asking me in the last stream about, I think he said sustain and release or something like that. So as it turns out, he got to me after the stream and clarified what he was trying to ask about, and it was this MIDI, I believe. And it didn't really occur to me as I was doing it, even though like the point of all this was that I'm supposed to explain all the stuff that I do and why I do it, and because it sort of is, pretty opaque to somebody who doesn't know what the hell I'm doing. I then proceeded to make this, which looks weird as fuck, and I didn't explain anything about why I was doing that, or why it sounded the way it did, or anything like that. So this guy, to demonstrate this, what I'm talking about, I'm gonna just redo it over here. So these are the notes that this instrument is doing. Here are the notes. Whoops. There's a less stupid way of doing this, but this is fine for now. And there's vibrato that I need to unfuck also. So that's the notes that this instrument is playing. However, in context, in the track, it sounds quite a bit different. There's like all kinds of articulation going on, and there's automated like stuff. I'm bringing effects in and out and whatnot. So let me explain how I went from that to the other one. Oh, wait a minute. Before I do any of this, I'm going to do something pretty cool for stream purposes. Hopefully that doesn't break my stream. It probably won't, but we'll see. Let me just do another one of these, actually. And now, the cool part. Wave candy. To compensate for the fact that I don't have a camera currently, I'm going to put this guy up here in the corner so that something visual happens when I talk. Isn't that pretty cool? Checkity check checks. Yeah, that looks pretty cool. Maybe it should be more like this. What about, why not? What about this? Maybe more like, I'm just messing around with these settings. Just give me a second here. So, where should I start with this? I'm gonna start with the more universal parts, and then I'm gonna narrow down on the parts that make Harmor interesting, which is the synth that this instrument is. This is Harmor right here. This is one of ImageLine's plugins. It's been around for about a gazillion years, and it's my most used plugin, as you can probably tell by the stack over here. This is my most used plugin by far. I'm going to start with the stuff that's not very Harmor specific. So the MIDI. Come on, bro. That's gonna cause a problem over here. Oh, and I could have also just taken it out of the master. I'm a professional. This is what I do. So there's the first differences. So, let's get started making this into that. First off, these notes. You'll notice that there's a note over here, and there's a little note up here with the little wedge doodad on it. These are slide notes. So you see up here, there's in the top left corner of the screen, when I hover over these guys, it says slide and portamento. These are articulations that are built into MIDI files, I think. I might be wrong about that, actually, but I'm pretty sure, like, if you save this as a MIDI file, it'll preserve that, like, behavior, I think. I don't really know, because I don't work with just MIDI files that often, but I'm pretty sure. Anywho, the note that's like a note is where the pitch starts, and this is the note that the pitch is sliding to. And it starts sliding at the beginning of this guy, in time, that is, like this. It starts over here, starts sliding right here, and it is done sliding, and it, like, arrives at this pitch at the end of this guy. So it starts down here at this B flat down here, and it immediately starts as soon as the note starts. It starts sliding in pitch, and then when it's halfway through the note, it's at the octave higher B flat, and you should be able to see it in here. Yeah. Yeah. See, it starts sliding, and then when it's halfway through, it's at the pitch. And I use this all the time. I am constantly messing around with the articulation in MIDI just to make my melodies a little more interesting. You know, you have to think of it sort of like a physical instrument. Like think when you're writing you know, synth MIDI, and you're trying to figure out, like, what's the right articulation you should do here. Picture how it would sound if, like, a really good, like, saxophone player or something were playing this, you know? And they would be doing all sorts of crazy, like, articulation stuff. And that's sort of, you know, what I go for. So I would bring this down here and start with a slide up, you know? And then do another one down here, why not? You know? And I just picked, like, to have these slide an octave just for no particular reason, just because it sort of felt right. That's how I make a lot of my decisions, as it turns out. So this guy. Whoop. Doop-a-doo, like that. And then this guy. You see, I wrote it out with no articulations. I wrote it out like this. With like an eighth note, then a quarter note here. With slides, it would look something like this, and then you double click this and hit that, you know, engage this property, and then hit accept, and there's your slide. So yeah. Now that's about a quarter of what's going on here with this instrument. So you'll also notice that there's these notes that are like hanging over, and if you listen to them, they also sound like slides. Oh, I should mention before any of that this guy up here, portamento, sounds like this. Like, you heard how the slide sounds, where it like, you know, does that. Portamento is where it only slides at the start of the note and nothing else, and it slides from the pitch of the last note to this pitch, and it does it like immediately, like in a few milliseconds. You hear that? Also pretty useful. But I didn't go for that with this one because I am using Harmer. And like I said, Harmer's great. Well, like I sort of implied, Harmer's great. Anyway, Harmer has this legato feature you see right here, and there's these little knobs over here. There's legato, portamento, and also velocity, release to portamento, legato time. I don't know what this one does. I don't really touch it. But these guys I make pretty frequent use of. Okay, so here's how I'll explain this. Portamento, this porta little guy, does the exact same thing that the porta thing in the MIDI, like over here, this guy. It does the exact same thing as that, so it basically does a slide at the start of the note, you see? But legato, so like, here's me playing like a chord, or, you know, playing more than one note at once without the legato on. You see that? And now here's that with the legato turned on. So the legato setting in Harmer basically makes it so that if you play a second note on top of the first one, it'll slide up to that second note. And how fast it'll do it depends on this knob here, which you can see I have set to 45 milliseconds. And I also have the logarithmic shape turned on so that it, you know, does that instead of this. You see? So yeah. And I'm using that here basically as like a better portamento. Like a better version of the turning this guy on, you know? Oh, also, it would have to be turning it on to the next note, because you remember, it's the first note, and then it slides up to the second note. Oh, am I missing anything? Nope, I think that's the same, pretty much, articulation. So, so that's how you get that part of it. But now there's something missing also, and it's that in the song it sounds like this. Now how am I doing that? Well, this is more Harmer stuff. I'll start with the simpler. The simpler effect by far is gonna be the vibrato. So you see these knobs over here. There's the vibrato, depth and speed. Watch over here. See that? That's vibrato. Now, so, I mean, you can hear, like, what it is. So, I just basically have an automation clip. What this bit here means is that like, at these time, like, blocks, the vibrato's all the way off, and then it, you know, ramps up, and then the vibrato's all the way on. So I only have it doing vibrato on the last note, where it's like, you know, emphasizes the last note. Hear that? Okay, and now the coolest one and the most unique thing to Harmer is this unison pitch thickness automation. So watch this. See how this pitch fader is moving? To explain what this is, I'm gonna open up another Harmer because that just is gonna make it easier. So this sound is called a saw wave. It's the default guy in Harmer, because Harmer is an additive synthesizer. Now, what that means is not really important right now. But basically, actually, forget that. Don't. It's a saw wave. Look, it's shaped like that. It's a saw wave. That's all you need to know. And when you have more than one saw wave, on top of each other, and you don't change anything else about the saw waves, what you pretty much get is just a louder saw wave in a digital world. You see that? But if you, for example, pan them in different places and have the pitch different, and you start them in different phases, and the phase is basically like where the phase is basically where this waveform starts, basically. Like you see how, like in this slice all the way on the left, there's a different part of the wave there every time I hit the note. That, like, change in, like, position left and right is what phase is. And you'll notice when the pitch is different, the phase drifts. See that? What this part of the plugin is basically doing is I'm having two saw waves playing at the same time, and this is having them basically they're tuned to different notes, basically. One's a little bit flat and one's a little bit sharp, and that causes this effect to happen because the phase drifts apart because they're not the same pitch. And that's the sound that makes is called phase cancellation. Because you see some of the frequencies in the harmonic series that you can see up here, because the saw wave has every harmonic in the harmonic series. When you have phase cancellation, it cancels out certain frequencies because they destructively interfere. And as you can see, it sort of has like a circular, it loops. Anywho, if you have a bunch of these, like say 9, and you have them starting at different phases, so you don't have that like pew sort of effect, and you like start them, like that. You start them having already been jumbled up. We call this a super saw. Like just having one as a saw wave. This is a super saw. And this synth that I'm using for this little bit here, it's basically a super saw. There's a little bit of complication, maybe? I don't even really remember. I mean, there's an extremely small amount of complication, but it's basically just a super saw. Like this. Anyway, this fader can be controlled in real time, which is pretty cool. This is not really a unique thing to Harmor, but this is like not a MIDI thing. This is like the plugin does this. So basically I, right click it, hit create automation clip, and this is the unison pitch thickness. That's this guy. That's how that guy was born. There's a couple of cool things you can do with the unison pitch by changing the unison pitch. One of my favorite things to do, I don't even remember how it goes, but no, that's stupid. Forget that. I'm just gonna. So one thing you can do, just to demonstrate, one hypothetical use, which I might be coming back to. This might be foreshadowing. One use that you can have for this super saw and automating this unison pitch thickness value is you can have uh, brass. If you do it like this, and if you also don't have it starting at full volume, you basically have brass. You know, it sounds a bit like how a wind orchestra does. So, brass. If you do it like that, it sounds a bit like, you know, brass. Like a trumpet. That's not what I'm using it for with this particular synth that I've been talking about, but that is one use for it. In this particular instance, I'm using it to convey a sense of like musician is like playing the instrument harder or louder. If you ever noticed with like wind players, a lot of the times when they play really loud, I mean this also happens with strings too, I suppose. When they like play really hard and they blow a lot of air through their instrument and whatnot, they don't always, and like good players will avoid this. It is common that they will drift out of tune from one another, and it sort of ends up having a sound sort of like this. Sort of like how this last note does. So to emphasize it even harder with the vibrato and everything, I just gave it a whole bunch of unison pitch thickness. It sounds sort of like, like over here, when it's super clean, it sounds like, an operatic, like, falsetto, chillaxed, like, regular singing, sort of, But over here, it sounds like, you're yelling, you're hitting a grunge, singing like a Soundgarden song, you know what I mean? So that's sort of what I'm trying to do with that, and I think that's everything notable about this guy. Alright, back to work. So this sound is not bad or anything. There's nothing outright terrible about any of this. I really like the drums of this. I am actually pretty happy with how those sound on their own, but as a part of a track, I don't know. I still feel like starting over, which is hard to do for a second stream of this, but I think it's going to be necessary. I really overcomplicated this, spending as long as I did philosophizing about the drums. I think I'm going to hit a save on this and open up a new guy. What I'm making here is supposed to be the Rush Kill Repeat track. It's supposed to be the final boss, the culmination. I'm picturing like this is going to be my Reptile. If you don't know, that's a Periphery song that's very long and dramatic that I like a lot. This is going to be my version. Oh wait, I forgot the coolest part of having a wave candy up there. I can make it. I can make it me. Look at that. So this is supposed to be like a super, dramatic, like finale, like this is where shit's going down sort of track. So I want it to sort of have everything at once, and it should, if I do my job right, this should be like the track to end all tracks right here. So I'm thinking about how I'm gonna do that. There's one obvious answer, which is guitar music. The obvious thing to do is to channel my inner Mick Gordon and make something crazy. I could go ahead and write a riff, I suppose. I'm not going to be bringing my guitars out on this particular stream because I haven't tested how fucked my shit's going to get when I try and record and stream at the same time. There's so many ways I can approach this. There's so much music I've written already that I'm gonna try and incorporate into this. Fortunately, metal lends itself to weirdness also, and really the styles of electronic music that I do, and like jazz, which there's also been a bit of in Rush Kill Repeat. All those styles sort of lend themselves to being kind of weird like that. I'm spending a lot of time talking about this and not really writing anything. So I'm starting to get on my own nerves, so I might as well write something. I'm gonna try and write something dramatic. I think what I should do for my next stream is full on guitar stream and just noodle around and see if I can come up with a kick-ass riff. We'll see. What I'm gonna decide now though is some important things, like what the main riff is gonna be like. It's gonna have a key, a time signature, and I can decide those now and see what kind of chord shapes I'm gonna be doing. Because I want to try and write this in a way that playing it on guitar is gonna be possible. So I gotta figure out what kind of tunings I'm gonna need early. So I guess now is my time to talk about metal, because that's so much of what I do, and it's gonna be such an important part of this track, I suppose. So standard. Let's talk about guitar tunings actually. So this is the standard tuning for for a 6-string guitar, E A D G B E. Sounds like that. This is the sound of a guitar when you're not playing anything, when you're not fretting anything and you strum it. That's what it sounds like. And E standard is workable with metal. I mean, metal started before the era of anybody tuning their guitars any differently. Way before the introduction of like 7 or 8-string guitars. Way before anything like that, people were playing metal basically as we know it today, to be honest. Like Metallica does actually use other tunings, but a lot of their songs are in E standard. There's also like, I think Opeth writes in E standard, and there's also a band called Silosis, which I believe has their guitars in E standard, or at least some of the time. The point is, E standard is totally workable with metal. But when you want something to be dramatic, and like when you want something to feel important, or when you want the music to reflect, for example, a boss that you're fighting that's big and intimidating, you sort of want some lower notes to get a more of a rumbly, you know, like earthquakey sort of feel of it. So the first change that people obviously made was they would the first like non-standard tuning that started to be really a thing is this. It's called drop D. Drop D is probably older than I think, actually. now that I'm thinking about it, Dadgad, which looks like this, is the slide guitar tuning, and that's probably pretty old, I would think. But anyway, for metal purposes, this is drop D. There are some like Metallica songs that are here. There's loads of metal that's like this. And the reason this is nice is because you get a power chord in your bottom 2, or in your lowest 2 strings. What happens after that most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, is you just bring this whole thing down. Like Periphery plays a lot of their songs, which is probably my favorite metal band, by the way, Periphery. Most of their songs, well, I mean, like, maybe half of their songs, are in this tuning. This is and this is the highest tuning that Periphery uses ever. Their 6-string drop C tuning. This is pretty much, these days, this is standard tuning for metal these days. Like, my guitars are practically never tuned higher than this. This is like the new way to live for metal musicians. Like, there are so many famous songs in this tuning. Like, practically all of System of a Down's songs, for example, are like this. Like Prison Song goes like dun. Oh, or however it goes. It's the point is it's in drop C. Like practically all of System of a Down songs are in drop C. It's just so ridiculously common. But there are other options. For example, there's this drop A tuning where you just have drop C, but you tune the C down to an A. This looks kind of weird, and at first, when you're playing a guitar tuned to this, it feels pretty weird. But there's actually a lot of cool stuff you can do with this. This is one of my personal favorites, and it's a candidate I'm considering for using with this song. I want to probably stick with one tuning, at least for like the main, like the riffs that are unique to this track. I'm going to stick to one tuning probably, just to make it a little more simple. So this is one of the candidates. It can be a little hard to work with sometimes, because you can't do like your usual power chords. Not that you would necessarily want to, depending on what you're doing. Like for Mick Gordon styles of, metal, like the Doom soundtrack and whatnot, there aren't actually that many power chords in Doom. Not low ones anyway. There are power chords up, on like these strings, but he doesn't usually bother with power chords down, like way the fuck down here. And when he's like has like guitars, tuned down there, you don't usually need to bother with power chords. Like the reason you use a power chord in the first place when you're in like E standard, you use a power chord is because, it gets you that rumbliness without having to, having a chord gets you the rumbly, like more deep harmonic texture to the notes that just playing one note, wouldn't give you. So, and there are other options, like I could do this is the tuning that Periphery uses for Reptile. I could also whip out the 7-string and go for 7-string stuff, which standard tuning for 7-string looks like this. The 7th string is this B. You'll notice this is not actually that much lower than C, which is the lowest string in C, in drop C, which, if you'll remember, I said is basically the new standard. So 7-string guitars, despite being lower, do get tuned down just as much as 6-string guitars. It's not a replacement for a 6-string. They're completely different instruments, and that's something I'm going to have to consider. So drop A with 7 strings is ridiculously common. Also, drop A flat. This is Periphery's preferred 7-string tuning. Also, like Kublai Khan, I think, uses this tuning. There's also drop G, which is right next to it, which I think Knocked Loose uses, or used to use, or something like that. Below that, you're starting to get into like H-string territory, which I would have to pitch my guitar down in post, because I don't actually own an H-string. To get pitches like E, I would have to tune it down, which is what I do actually on the Neon City track. And on the Space Station track. Which I don't think either one of those are in the game yet. But when they're in the game, you'll hear them. I pitch my 7-string down to the appropriate pitches, which the Space Station track is in key of F, and the Neon CD track is in the key of D. So I have to pitch my guitars down. You can do this live, actually, using a harmonizer pedal or something. I don't. I just record it in a different key and then pitch it down, which works fine, but it ends up being kind of annoying for getting a good tone like that. So I don't really want to do that. I'm thinking another option that's pretty weird, to be honest, is going like this, using this tuning, which you'll notice is a mirror of, you remember how when I said there's a drop A where you just take drop C and you pull a C down to A? This tuning for 7-string is basically that. It's basically if you had the 6-string tuned like this, and tuned everything down a minor third, and then also, you know, did this and got rid of the highest string. So this is an option. I could also just do this and pretend I'm playing a really low-tuned 6th string. That's pretty common, to be honest. I'm not really sure. You see, this is why writing for metal usually happens with a guitar in hand. I don't usually do it like that because, frankly, I'm lazy. And my first step, the first time me ever playing my riffs is usually when I go to record them. Probably shouldn't be what I do here. How long have I been streaming? An hour? I could cheat in the same way that I did last stream and just make drums for like 1,000 years. Because, Doom-style metal drums layered on synth drums is something I'm a lot more practiced in than breakcore, and also something that I'm gonna have to do for this, but it's also something that is awesome and I kind of want to talk about. So I'm gonna do that actually. I'm gonna go ahead and make a little metal, you know, drum thing. How about 150? Yeah, 150 is good. I could do this. Actually, this should probably be open. Well, should it? Now I'm doubting myself. Actually, fuck this. I should be doing it like this. Whoa. Whoops. Actually, let's have a triplet feel. You know what? You know, I need to give myself let myself have a bit of a treat here. I don't go for triplet feel stuff enough. Okay, is this too Mick Gordon-y? Is this too similar to BFG Division? It might be. It's good enough for now, for just, you know, making the drums. Alright. That is a beat. And it's too loud. Yeah, I'm gonna put a limiter on the master. Okay, time for some synth drums. Ideally, probably... I think it's this one that I go for all the time. Probably, I mean, ideally I actually want something not too... like, bassy. Not something that's not gonna disrupt my mix too much if I let it do its thing. I was taking my own advice the other day, listening to that Noisia track Stigma, and it struck me how tiny the kick and snare were for being like pretty hefty bass music. The kick and snare in that track are like super, honestly, minimal. Like, producers today would not be doing that. And I probably want to follow in their footsteps a little bit. They seemed to know what they were doing. I think this guy is the one I want. And I'm going to do it like this to make it even, even less. To make it even less of a thing. Even that might be good enough. I'm going to put this guy in 10. Just turn my volume up a little bit so I can hear better. It's maybe a little early for this, but I'm going to go ahead and add in my sidechain doodads. You do want sidechaining in metal, but not as much as in full-on bass music. Okay, and peak controller, bam, mute, oop, nope, the other way. And that'll probably do. Okay. And now I need a snare. A lot of writing music, if you didn't know, is changing numbers from one number to another number a whole bunch of times. This is a lot of what my job is, to be honest. Now with metal kick drums in particular, especially when you're layering them with synth drums, with this guy, since I'm layering it with that guy, which has plenty of bass, I don't actually want the kit bass drum to have a whole lot of bass in it. What's really important about it is, and what's a significant amount of the character of metal and the way it sounds, to be honest, is the way the kick drum sounds with this little notch, or not notch, with this little like peak, the opposite of a notch up here in the middle of this treble bar right here, that sort of range. That's a lot of why metal sounds the way it does right there. You've definitely heard that. I mean, who hasn't? That's what you're looking for in metal right there, is this little guy. That's part of why it's so critical to layer realistic drums underneath the synth drums. The synth drums are really there for the feel of it, really. It sounds too like, I don't even know what the word is, like cynical to say that it's just for mixing purposes, but it's like 98% for mixing purposes is why these guys are here. It's supposed to mostly, like, most of the way sound like a drum kit. When the whole track is mixed together, it's gonna sound like, I mean, listen to the Doom soundtrack, listen to the way that sounds. Like, listen to Rip and Tear, you know? Or like BFG Division. They have probably, I think, synth drums. I actually don't know for sure. It's theoretically possible to just have that good, that crisp, and that clean of a well mic'd up of a kick drum, you know? They could just have a really well isolated drum room and like a super duper mic'd up drum kit. That's theoretically possible. But to get the level of push that exists in that sort of music, when all I have access to is the stuff that comes with FL pretty much, like I don't have like Superior Drummer for basically monetary reasons. And also for hard drive space reasons, which is another way of saying monetary reasons. For my purposes, having synth drums to give it that little extra foundation is pretty important. It's pretty much, I like it. I cannot go without it unless I'm just making straight up metal and like only metal and not bothering with the electronic parts, which I sometimes do, but that's not what this is. This is Rush Kill Repeat, where I haven't actually put any in yet, but there's gonna be like 8-bit sounds and shit like that in this, so there's no reason not to have also every synth advantage that I can get, you know what I mean? Putting the fruity balance there also makes things way, way louder, so I'm gonna go ahead and bring all that down now. I can also afford to cut the kick off really hard to make sure it's all at the same level. I can afford to do that because the part of the kick that goes above that line in volume is pretty much just the snap of the very highest, pretty much just this. Just the snap of that is what brings it above this, and hard clipping that at whatever level this is, minus 4 dB, is not really going to change the sound that much. You have to go way further down before you start getting a significantly different sound. Like, up here it's basically the same. You know, you can't even tell a difference at 4.5 dB. And now here's another neat thing. Toms. These guys are processed basically the exact same as kick drums, which means you put a big ol' scoop in the middle, you have a big ol' bottom end, and you have that same notch right up here. You give it a big ol' smiley face, basically. That's what we call this, the smiley face. The reason you do this in, like, metal is because the mid, like, over here, is where your vocals are. Especially in metal where you're doing a lot of, like, screams and growls. I can actually demonstrate this because my stuff is... because I'm in here. As you can see when I'm talking, a significant part of the clarity of, like, what vowels I'm saying and stuff like that is right here, around this 500 hertz range. This is where, like... this is... not the only part, obviously, I'm lighting up the whole thing, basically, but human speech, the most important parts of it are, for musical purposes, at least, are the fundamental tone, which is over here, the mid, which is where ya, 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 wa, 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 yo, yo, ya, ya, which is where your vowels are, you can see that in there, ya, 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 you can see, like, that movement, that's called a formant, it's where your vowels are, basically, and, like, right in here, so... in your like 500 to 1000 hertz sort of range. That's super important for clarity, for understanding. And then also the articulation, the hiss, the S's up here are super important. And also not just the S's, but the same frequencies when you're not making an S sound in your regular voice are also pretty damn important. So like ah yeah 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 you can see I'm lighting up this area, the same area as when I make an S sound. It's getting lit up a little bit even when I'm not making an S sound. And that area is when I do some vocal processing, which I might um, end up doing. I'll explain more about that, but that's pretty important too. But anyway, in metal, like non-electronic, just metal, the reason why you have the big smiley face scoop, and you also do this to like the guitars and stuff sometimes, the reason you do that is, or well, for mixing the vocals, so you can have the vocals be audible, because metal is so loud, you need to like scoop things out to have room for other stuff to go. Whereas with like more regular, like acoustic styles of music, like I don't know, country or like the Beatles sort of songs, stuff like that, you don't really need to bother with that at all. You can just have everything be the way it is and just adjust the volumes, tweak the EQ, however, if you're working as a producer, you just, whatever the musicians say, like, oh, I want it to be warmer, then you bump the mids or whatever, and you just like itty bitty adjustments on the EQ. But you don't need to do anywhere near this kind of level of stuff in other types of music. But in metal, this is absolutely necessary. But for my purposes, I'm keeping this, even though there is no vocals in this track, and there's not really going to be. Because one, I have synth elements that I'm going to be mixing in here, but also two, this is like so characteristically metal sounding that I want to preserve that, even if it's not strictly necessary. I mean, come on, listen to those toms, man. I mean, that's metal right there. I mean, come on. That might as well be like a Slipknot song or something like that, And the snare. So I'm layering in synth snares, so I don't really need the fundamental tone part, but I do want the 500 hertz to 1000 range. And I realize this contradicts what I just said, but this is the snare. This is the snare, and it is therefore cheating, and it can do whatever it wants. So I'm going to go ahead and bump up this stuff. Oh, wait a minute. There was a part of the vocal range I didn't even mention, which is like super important. This presence part, you do this when you have vocals. I mean, it's not literally this much, but like, you'll see when I have vocals, I literally do that almost. It like looks ridiculous, but trust me, that PRS, it's, I think it is an abbreviation of presence. This is like the presence range. So if you've ever seen a knob on like an amp or something that says presence, it's like bumping this part up. For vocals, that's super nice, and I use that liberally. Okay, I'm gonna chillax on this a little bit, and also bring it down overall, because it's very loud. Okay, now the cymbals. I mean, some special things are going to have to happen with these guys, so I'm just going to turn them down and ignore them for now. Oh yeah, now that's metal. And I'm also going to add a little B section. And here, I'm going to switch to hats. Could be good, actually. That's definitely a both snare situation. Yeah. Playing with the pitch of these kicks is a good way to get some variation in the percussion. Yeah, like that. This is still very much like, I mean, the drum beat is so obviously BFG division, it's going to be completely different. As I'm listening to it more and more, I'm like, that is so 100% BFG division. But it is going to be different. And I mean, listen to how freaking punchy that sounds, man. I mean, jeez. That is some kicking, kick drums and stuff. And I guess I'll add in a bit of a... No, I'll do it over here. A bit of a ride cymbal moment. So I have all the cymbals here. I'll start with the crash. You want lots of high frequencies with the crash. The rest of it, you don't care about, basically. The high frequencies are what the crash is. And I'm also going to put a shit ton of reverb on it, because that's how I live my life. Since this is not strictly metal and it's like electronic fusion stuff, I'm okay with having the crash cymbal be basically an effect and not really behave like an instrument. Specifically with the crash. The other ones, I want them to feel pretty real, but this one, you know, it can be like that. And also because the crash is so high frequency, I don't care about clipping it and it clipping. Because clipping manifests as a lot of high frequency content. And also, I mean, some extremely low frequency content, but not enough to be actually a problem. But because it's mostly high frequency stuff, when you're distorting like this, with a crash cymbal where it's almost all high frequencies anyway, I really don't care. Like, you see how ridiculously hard it's clipping here? If this was any other instrument, if this was the kick drum, if this was vocals, if this was anything, that would be an extremely harsh amount of clipping, but because it's a crash cymbal, you like barely notice it. It's like easier to tell. It's easier to tell that a crash cymbal is clipping by looking up here at the thing and seeing like the noise at the very, very bottom. There's a little bit of noise there that isn't there when it's not clipping. And that's literally the only way to tell. I honestly, if I didn't know it was clipping here, I mean, if you asked me, like, is this clipping or not, I could probably give you the right answer, but, I mean, if I'm not looking for it, like, I do not care. And same for everyone who listens to this track, because trust me, it's not a big deal. Just trust me. Just trust. Now, with that being said, I also don't want it to cut off too hard because I do want it to preserve the side chaining. I'm gonna not limit it too hard, and I'm also gonna keep it down here and maybe even lower it some more because the cymbals, they sound loud and like very present, but they're actually almost always super duper low in the mix in, well, really both in metal and in electronic music. The like white noisy, swoopy, like atmospheric, and the cymbal-y stuff, all of that, like the super duper top end noisy stuff, is almost never that like high in the mix. Like for my first album, the one that's called Modern Chiptune Beats Part 2. The amount of noise in that one is like super excessive and like nowhere near what even super noisy like subgenres of metal, like where the noise is like what you want, even they usually don't go as hard as I did on that track, and I'm not doing anything like that here. I think that one's one of my favorites I've ever made, to be honest. pretty damn cool. It's like out there and doesn't it sounds it's the sort of track that's like unpleasant to that sort of timbre texture of a tone is sort of like coffee or alcohol. It's sort of an acquired taste, and that one just it bites. It's like acidic, and like I like that a lot. And by the way, Philip, thank you for letting me thank you for letting me run wild with my ridiculously out there taste. Cause man, I am consistently surprised by how uh when I'm like, hey man, what do you think of this? I'm thinking about doing this for this track, and I'm gonna have this, and like every time you're like, man, this is awesome. And I'm like, wow, there are some people who would not answer that to that. I mean, I appreciate it. I love this type of music I do. Okay, that's good. Okay, the ride is an easy one. It's kind of like Crash. And you don't want to compress this one. You want to leave the compressors away from this one. Because you don't want the ringing. Like, you don't want that stuff. You hear all that? You don't want any of that. You just want the little t. That's all you want out of the ride. Nothing else. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but that's literally like 99% of what a ride is for. It's basically so you can have like a percussive, like staccato, like t sound in the percussion without having to resort to having closed hat or like pedal stuff. Any of this. In metal, you don't wanna close anything ever in metal, so use the ride for that sort of thing. I don't know if any drummers would co-sign that opinion, but that's basically how I think of it. Okay, there we go. That's probably fine. I mean, even that's kind of high for the Crash, I think. I really have just been obsessing over drums the last few days. Okay, as much as I've been mostly needlessly like hyper focused on getting these drums exactly right, I do really like the sound of these. This is some good stuff. Oh yeah, and there's something I was thinking about doing. Something I use a lot to get an 8-bit feel is this lo-fi effect over here, because it bit crushes stuff. For a pretty, vintage sound, where it's like, it makes the sound compressed, but like old school kind of compressed before like compression algorithms were really a thing, so the sound just had like a lower resolution. Which, it sounds weird for like sound to have a resolution, but it does. So you can see up in here, it's kind of far away. It's really kind of small, but like up in here, if you squint your eyes, you can see how when I have the bit crushing really high, the volume jumps from one volume position to the next. That's like your resolution of sound. You have a fixed temporal resolution, time, which is the sound equivalent of like your frame rate. It's your sample rate for sound. And then you have every different volume position, which is like the sound equivalent of like all the pixels on the screen. Anyway, this sort of effect like reduces that artificially. It also does some other stuff so it doesn't sound like complete garbage, but it mostly just does that. Anyway, I'm kind of curious. This is basically how I cheat to get like 8-bit, sort of sounding drums without actually having to design drums. Like, without having to buy a freaking antique, 8-bit chip or whatever and actually doing it, which some people do still do, I think, or I would assume. I just used this effect, and it gets you like 98% of the way there, and that's the way I cheat. Anyway, I'm kind of curious if I make the layered drums bit crushed, will it be cool? Will it be interesting? It might be terrible. Who knows? Okay, this is not going to work on the crash, but I have another trick up my sleeve. So, when I want to make something organic sound artificial, what I like to do is, and I can't also, if I can't, for whatever reason, the bit crushing doesn't really work, what I like to do is stretch it out, make it long. And the artifacting that stretching algorithms give things can have interesting results. So let's see. It is pitched down, which is not what I wanted. This is probably what I want. Yeah. Listen to that. Nice and artificial sounding. Whoops, not what I wanted. Now, how do I guess I just drag it there. Nope, now I have a 9. That's not really what I wanted, but actually is fine. I could just do that. I could do a similar edit to 7. Yeah. Now let's see if this doesn't sound like complete trash. Yeah. I can also shrink this now that it's stretched out. Well, excuse me, now that it's stretched out. I've been talking for a while. Okay, I think I'm gonna wrap up the stream right around here. I spent a long time making these drums, and for the next stream, I'm gonna it's gonna be a guitar stream. I'm gonna make an actual riff, and I'm gonna also get to talk about guitars and guitar tones, which is awesome. And I'm going to talk about digital guitar cab emulation, which is basically fucking magic and is really cool, and I want to talk about it. Wait a minute. My sidechaining has been off this whole time. I guess it is pretty minimal sidechaining. What if I do something like this? Peace out, YouTube.